Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Webinar Wednesday. I'm Stephanie Fox from the Network One. I'm going to be moderating this webinar and I'm going to go through a little bit of housekeeping now. So I'm going to post these in the chat box, but just to talk through them, we will have a 5-minute introduction now from me. Spencer will speak for about 35 to 40 minutes. Then we will have 15 minutes for Q&A, and we're aiming to finish by 1:55 London time, so everyone can be ready for the next appointment. So while Spencer is speaking, please do keep your microphones muted. We'll unmute your mic if we're calling on you to ask a question. But that being said, it would be great if you could leave your videos on so that Spencer has some friendly faces to present to. Of course, if you're still eating lunch, don't worry about that. There will be a Q&A portion at the end. If you have any questions in the meantime, just send them to me directly in the chat. So to do this, go to your chat box, and where it says to, there should be a drop-down menu. Instead of everyone, select Stephanie Fox. We'll go through all of the questions and we'll select a few to ask Spencer once he's finished speaking. All questions should be sent to me in the chat box. If you'd like to ask the question yourself, just say so in the chat. So just type I'll ask. If you prefer for me to ask the question, say so as well. You should hopefully have your Zoom viewing mode set to speaker view. If not, just click speaker view at the top right of your screen. Spencer will be sharing slides on his screen, so if you can't see Spencer's speaking window when his slides are on, select show active speaker video. If you have any technical issues, just message Lizzie Gold either directly in the chat, or you can email Lizzie at lizzie.gold@network1.com. We're going to be recording this webinar, so if you don't want to take notes, there is no need to. We'll send the link to everyone afterwards. And in the unlikely event that the system crashes, just wait a couple of minutes and log back in with the same link that you used to log in this afternoon. Thank you very much for listening to those. I would now like to introduce our speaker. Spencer Gallagher built, ran and sold a $12 million global agency, so he knows how this is done. Today, he runs Cactus, which is a UK-based business consultancy, helping owners of small independent agencies to become mid-sized independent agencies, who are typically growing from about $1 million to $10 million in revenue. He's also the author of the best-selling book, Agencyphonics. At the end of April 2020, Spencer and his partners launched Agencyphonics as a social enterprise, a new global community dedicated to helping agency people solve the challenges they have by providing them with ethically sourced data and the knowledge to make informed business decisions. Last year, his agency-focused consulting business, Cactus, completed a survey of more than 250 agencies in the UK to find out exactly where and how it is that successful agencies most often win new business. Now in 2020, as most of you know, he's collaborated with us, the Network One, to produce a global version of the same survey. So today we're going to find out, do the same techniques work everywhere? Are some countries and regions really different? The results were due to be premiered at the 2020 Indie Summit, but instead they're going to be shared today. So without further ado, I will turn over to Spencer.
Thank you very much. That's a wonderful introduction. So welcome everybody. We shall begin. Oh no, we won't. There we go. Is that Murphy's Law of presentations? Right. So my journey, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just explaining how we got here today. My journey in agency world started in 1999, so 21 years ago. In that purple shed on the left-hand side, my business partner always says that I started in the small shed to the side of the big shed, but I can assure you it was the big shed. And somebody, when in my early agency days, came up to me and said that Maurice and Charles Saatchi, those people on the right, built their business on lunches and dinners. And that was the only information that I ever really got in my early years about how agencies won new business, lunches and dinners. So I proceeded over the next 9 years to build a top 8 UK digital agency. That's where we were. And I sold the business to Gyro and became part of the world's largest B2B agency and part of the leadership team there. We were about 100 million in total. And through that journey, I became more and more curious about where leads were coming from, because I kept looking at other agencies and seeing what they were doing, and I'd often copy what they were doing, thinking they must know what they're doing, but I didn't really have the data, the facts. And as I started to build, well, in fact, once I sold the business to Gyro, the CEO there had said to me, I'll share with you the secret of agency new business. And I was actually like, there's a secret to this. And he started to sort of tell me what his version of the truth was. And as I took that away, once I finished my earn out with Gyro, I decided to, take some time out, and I started to write down all the ways that I won new business. And I then realized that actually that new business was coming probably not from the ways where most people were putting their attention and their marketing efforts into. So post Gyro, I started a consultancy business called Cactus, and I wrote this book called Agencyphonics. You know about. We also have a podcast called Agencyphonics, and I continued this kind of journey of discovery about finding out where leads came from. It almost became a bit of an obsession. And people talk about Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours to be an expert. I certainly think I've probably spent 15,000 hours plus now of time trying to understand where leads actually come from for agency businesses and often service businesses too. So we finished the report last year, and there were quite a few surprises in there. There were quite a few obvious things in there. And as Steph said, basically we decided to, we had a conversation with Julian. Julian said, I'd love to know, how would these results be if we ran this survey internationally? So this survey today was built on the premise that lead generation strategies should be based on where actual leads come from in agencies, not where people think they come from. And I've seen a lot of other lead generation reports where they say, what are your strategies? But there's no evidence to say that those strategies actually turn into agency clients. So I tried very hard to create this as also as a validation for some people out there who are often sold by third-party companies wonderful silver bullets on, sign up to our service and we'll fix your lead generation problems. But actually, and to be fair, I wanted to find out if those were actually true. Were all the leads coming from these other Me Too kind of solutions that I'd see offered on the market? So before we start, I want to just remind everyone why leads are important. I'm not trying to teach anyone to suck eggs here. I think we all know why leads are important, right? Because leads generate sales and sales generate business for all of us. But there are some key points here that I'd like to just remind everybody why it's important to continually find leads for agencies. Number one, because they help us create more diverse portfolios and become less dominant on sometimes our best clients, which can become very large and very dominant. And it gives us, it's a much better, broader range of clients within our agency. Number two, new leads make us aware of new emerging demands. For example, in a survey I ran recently in our community, over 50% of people during the COVID-19 lockdown period had sold services they'd never sold before. So if you have leads coming in, you're more aware of the changes that organizations in their demand. So it keeps us a little bit more future-proofed in sometimes our offering. Number three, if you've got any poor quality existing clients in your agencies, any D clients, as we sometimes call them, or any clients that are unprofitable or you're continually over servicing, then new leads help you replace those. Number four, clients almost always leave at some point, and hopefully they'll take you with them to the next company. But 3 to 4 years is the average shelf life for a client. I know many of us have had clients for much longer periods than that, but having new leads coming in gives us some protection against clients leaving and new people coming in and bringing in previous agencies they've worked with. Leads also, an abundance of leads helps you move your pricing up from a position of weakness. It's often very hard to go back to clients and raise your prices if you haven't already got 5 or 6 people that are looking to work with you and pay a higher price for your services. But it also gives you the opportunity to test new pricing models. So those of you who want to test more performance-based models or more value-based models, you're able to do that if you've got more leads. Number 6, agency team members can get bored of working on the same work. If you're not winning new leads, you may not be bringing more interesting, new, diverse projects and work into your business. And also, if you're winning more new business, it can create a more positive winning culture. You can also back up your ability to deliver on your agency vision of growth, because people will see that new brands are looking to work with you. Number 7, agencies without leads rely on existing clients. And whilst there's nothing wrong with that, and it's probably one of the best ways to focus your attention in some ways, those agencies I've found statistically do grow slower. They grow in a much more ethical, more robust way, but they do grow a lot slower. And sometimes they struggle to break through certain turnover levels. Number 8, it helps you attract the right type of clients, because the more leads you've got, the more you can qualify. They can qualify whether they're going to be clients that are going to be fun to work with. They're going to help you build more fame, win awards, draw attention to the work that you do, hopefully pay you, reward you with the right levels of investment, and help your agency move forward. And sometimes gives us the chance to move away from price buying clients to relationship or value buyers. And it gives us the opportunity to potentially qualify out of pitches. If we've got lots of leads, then we don't have to necessarily, we can take a no pitch agenda approach, because we can say, look, we don't pitch because we've got so many leads coming in where people aren't asking us to. And it can also, and some people who struggle with procurement-led sales can help us qualify those out. Not everyone does struggle with them, but some agencies do. And then lastly, really, it helps drive your reputation through regular success PR. Those agencies that continually promote, they're winning new clients, that can send a message out to other brands that you are a successful company to work with. And lastly, as I started off at the beginning, it improves your cash flow, leads turn into sales, which hopefully should make your business on the whole a lot less stressful to run and to grow. So in 2016, I wanted to validate what were the main lead sources for agencies. I kept encountering different agencies, many agencies who I'd often find who had one or two tactics for new business, often using internal telemarketing or external telemarketing, or maybe continual kind of content writing. I'm not saying these things are wrong, but the strategies for agency marketing seem to be, as I often call it, the cobbler's shoes syndrome, where, we were fantastic businesses at marketing our clients' businesses, but not very good at marketing our own. But I wanted to know, was it really just intermediaries, marriage brokers, agency and brand, event sort of events that were set up? Was it just outsourced sales and marketing? Was it just email and social? Was it just fame? And these were the main strategies that I would often see. And so some of you who've read our book will know that in 2014, we set about to review £1.5 billion worth of pipeline sales. So basically, I called up all of my friends, and I have a lot of friends who run a lot of agencies, and I asked them to show me their pipelines. I also work with £40 million worth of agencies, so I got those guys to show me all their pipelines, and we started to look at all the pipelines, and we looked and analysed all of their biggest clients. Where were their leads coming from? And from that research, we found there were 4 main ways that agencies generated their leads, just 4 areas. And most agencies were good at 2 out of the 4 areas. And the ones that were good at the 3 or 4 areas, they were the ones that were growing the fastest, and they were growing more robustly. So back then, and in the book, we called it the 30-30-30-10 of lead generation, of agency lead generation, because 30% of leads came from one source, 30% came from another, 30% came from another, and actually where people spent 90% of their time, actually only 10% of the leads came from. I'll tell you more shortly about what those areas are, but that's really where we started. But last year, when we carried out the UK survey, I really wanted to validate, was that 30-30-30-10 still valid? Had things changed in the last 6 years with the change of more digital marketing, and more technology within the marketing place, and agencies now becoming even more vast? The number of agencies in the landscape has considerably grown as more and more channels have developed. So we learned 3 things from the UK agency. The UK agency showed us that the 30-30-30-10, the 4 areas that I discovered in 2016, had actually changed. So all 4 areas were now equal. It was between 20 and 25% for each area. So first of all, the 10% area had grown in strength, and that mainly come because a lot of that involved social media. So now we have these 4 areas and they're all equal. And we renamed it the Cactus Lead Generation System. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is later on, I'm going to compare the global survey against the Cactus Lead Generation System. So the UK survey identified that there were only 12 lead sources out of 38 ways that agencies typically won, you know, where their lead source had come from. But 12 of those sources made up 80% of how they won their largest clients. So the logical thing here was to make sure that all of the agencies that read the survey would focus their time and effort into those 12 areas first, because they were more likely to win business from those areas when marketing in those areas. That doesn't mean that the other 26 areas don't work, but it just means that they're not as effective and didn't drive the return on investment. Some of those other 26 areas are very, very strong, valid ways of doing new business. And some of you may have won your largest clients from one of those 26 ways. It's just on the whole, that hasn't always been the case. And I think that the most important thing that came from this is to understand that you should market to all areas eventually. And the third thing we found, and this was actually one of the most staggering findings for us, because especially for me, because I speak to agency owners daily, and they often apologize to me because they ring me up because they've got a new business problem, and they ring me up and they say, or an agency growth problem, and they'll say, you know, oh, I'm really, really sorry, Spencer. I'm really embarrassed to tell you, but all of our business comes from referrals. And I'm often saying, well, don't be embarrassed about it. You should be excited. You should be ecstatic. The fact that you've got such a great reputation, that you've got such a high thought of agency, that people are referring you. And so what I did was I looked a little bit further into those 50%, and what we identified, there were 13 areas that drove referrals into agencies. So when we talk about referrals into agencies, it's not just, you know, a client coming in. There are 13 different referring you to another client. There are 13 different areas, and all of these sources, if you're smart, you should be able to create a strategy to proactively drive referrals rather than waiting, because most of us, we genuinely do just sit and wait for someone to refer us business. But what if we were to proactively come up with a referral system that would drive referrals from those 13 areas? So let's get to the International Lead Generation Survey. There was 183 agencies who participated all around the world, and this is the first year we've run this. So I'm really, really confident that give this 2 or 3 years, and we should be up into several hundred, if not 1,000 agencies giving us this regular feedback from moving forwards, if Julie and Stephanie and I can go through the pain of doing this again. And we then asked the agencies who took part, where was the main headquarters of the agencies that took part? And we validated in the end that 53 different countries took part. So I believe this is the largest and most diverse new business lead generation survey for agencies on a global basis ever. We asked, how long has your agency been in business? So we asked how long agencies have been in business, and what was quite important about this was actually on the whole, 84.6% have been in business for more than 5 years. So I felt that was strong, because we had, you know, some businesses that were very established. We all know that the failure rate of businesses in the first 4 years in most countries is very high. So at this stage, we've got some maturity, and I was very, very encouraged by that. We asked people how many people were on their payroll. And again, this will be very interesting to see over time, as time develops, as post-COVID, do we see new potential models from agencies coming out. But just under a quarter of agencies had over 50 employees, and just over 3/4 of agencies had under 50 employees. And that was good for us to know, because it also validated the turnover figures when we asked people what their revenues were. That we know that 27.1% of agencies had revenues of over 5 million. So it just verified for us that the revenues matched the employee levels, and that the data was more integral. 63% of clients had more than 1,000 employees. So 63% of the largest client from the agencies surveyed had more than 1,000 clients. And yes, there is correlation clearly between the size of agency spend and the size of the actual organization. Whilst there are some very well-funded startups out there, there is no question that there are bigger marketing and there are bigger budgets around digital transformation for other types of agencies in much larger organizations. We asked which industry was your largest client from. And I'm not too surprised to find that financial services and IT and tech were high up. We saw that also in the UK survey. Food and beverage was very strong, which we would imagine are always going into a global downturn, that FMCG and food and drink would always perform well in shortly. And so that's encouraging that there were lots of people focusing in that area. And automotive was high too. The least saturated areas were tourism, obviously an area that has been short-term affected by COVID, real estate, which also could be affected, kitchen and bath, hygiene and beauty. But what for me was quite interesting was looking in the middle. What were the areas in this which were maybe underserved? Where were the less saturated? And I noticed that transport and logistics was particularly low down. And I know many private equity and venture capital companies right now have been sinking money into logistics and transport organizations because they're seeing a massive change in the way that whole market is going to grow with more move to e-commerce, more online deliveries, and maybe a more distribution of the way people are working and less centralized, heavy density of commuter belts and things like that. So we asked, what did your largest clients spend with you in the last 12 months? And what was interesting there was that regardless of the agency size, the lead source data overall was pretty much the same. There wasn't, the larger clients didn't necessarily come from a different lead source that the smaller clients came from. So part two, and this is the bit you've all been waiting for. What was the lead source of the 183 agencies' largest client who participated in the international survey? Well, in the international survey, there were 29 individual lead sources. So just a reminder, the UK had 38 lead sources, and we had slightly less in this one. So it was, and here's a list actually. Now, most of you probably will recognise that your largest client probably came from one of those 29 areas. At a quick glance, but I'll tell you more about the weighting and where they came from. Good to see Network One had made it into the top 29 there. And then we asked, was the client referred to you? So we followed on from the surprise learnings of the UK survey, where we were staggered. It was literally just under 49.6%, I think it was from memory. But in the global survey, 65.2% of people classed the lead that came in as a referred lead, which is a staggering finding from my perspective. And something that hopefully, as we come talk about the conclusions, we can talk about the actions that should really help those of you looking for more leads in your agency, how you can take advantage of that information. We asked, so you can see a UK survey was 50%, international 65.2%. So earlier on, I talked to you about the Cactus lead generation system and the 4 ways that agencies' leads could always be categorized into. So let me tell you what they are now. So the first area was networking or socializing. So your networks, your friends, your family, your business acquaintances, the people you may have formerly worked with, the people in your business networks and societies, and people that you've met through business in your career, leads that come from events that you attend or you organize yourselves, speaking, public speaking, whether it be through the speakers that you meet on panel or members of the audience, and thought leadership. And typically we would find around 25% of an agency's business. So thought leadership underpins all of those areas. So what you're talking about, what your point of view is, perhaps what your personal brand is, what you're a key person of influence in, that was what underpins that first area. And that is typically around 25%, should be around 25% of your, if your lead sources. And I'll talk more about how we validate that shortly. The second area is strategic partnerships and alliances. So that could be, for example, another agency, a competitive agency or a frenemy. It could be a complementary agency. It could be a technology partner. It could be your printer. It could be your cloud infrastructure provider. It could be someone who you work in sponsorship with. It may be that we take the example of perhaps someone like IBM who does the technology lab at Wimbledon. You know, that partnership that they have there, that joint partnership could create opportunities between other sponsors and other partners. The third area, so again, 25% from that area. The third area is client referrals. So your existing clients referring you to other clients, and then ex-clients. That's a client that leaves you and then takes you to the next company that they go to because you are a trusted advisor and you've had a proven track record with them. And that area isn't all referrals, it's just specifically client referrals and ex-clients. And that area is also around 25% typically of an agency's lead generation source. And then lastly, we have the marketing activity area. And this is the area that was, only sort of 6 years ago was only 1 in 10 lead sources of largest clients would come from this area. But in this world where we've moved more and more online, has been probably the fastest growing area and is now typically coming in around 20 to 25% of all leads that are generated. In particular, evidence of this will be those of you that have had leads in the recent months. I know many of my clients have over the past few months suddenly coming in from LinkedIn. And originating from LinkedIn, not just necessarily people they previously met through other sources and then have inquired through LinkedIn. So when I map that out against the data from the international results, you'll see that the 25 is pretty close. Marketing activity is in the 20 to 25% range. Partnerships is comfortably at 25%. Client referrals, however, is very low, and we'll talk more about that later. And Nest is extremely high. So the one characteristic that's come out of this for me already is that on a global business, speaking, networking, attending events, running your own events, being a thought leader clearly plays a major difference in the weighting of where your largest client has originated from. So 13 of those 29 lead sources generated 80% of the clients. In the UK one, it was 12, but in the global one, it was 13. And for some reason, it's not going to show me those. I'm going to show you those in a minute. So let me give you the 5 key findings from the survey. Number 1, the 4 key ways that the Cactus lead generation system that we use, it still applies. So my recommendation for all of you to go away today, if you've not done this before, and some of you know me will have done this, is go away and write down your top 5, 10, 20 clients and audit them, cross-reference them against those 4 ways. Where do your leads come from as an agency? Do they all come from client referrals and ex-clients? Do they come all from Nest, from networking, speaking, or thought leadership? Do they come from strategic partnerships or alliances? Do they come from all 4 areas? But understand which areas you're strong in, which are you weak in, because it may be one of the easiest ways for you to suddenly increase the amount of leads you've got going in by widening your marketing for your agency in those areas. Number 2, the Nest area, the networking, speaking, thought leadership and events area, is clearly a very important one on a global basis. Socializing, speaking, running and attending events, conferences, there is absolute strong evidence from my point of view. When I've looked at some of the fastest growing global agencies in the past 5 years, the ones that seem to have organically grown from nothing to 400-500 employees, all of those businesses have strong thought leaders, almost on a level of David Ogilvy or, Morris and Charles Saatchi or JWT or, Chart and Day. Like the thought leadership from the owners is clearly a difference. And the personal brands of those leadership teams and those managing directors and CEOs and founders definitely plays an impact. So number two, I would really focus strongly on building momentum in those areas, whatever you're doing. I think I always like to quote those of you who come across a UK, was actually now a global agency called Social Chain, who's a social media agency that's grown several hundred employees in the past 3 to 5 years. Is that, you know, Stephen Bartlett did 58 speaking events last year. You know, this is my third speaking event this week. You know, how, you know, in a changing world, how will you adapt, and how will you be able to increase those thought leadership that you're doing? The third finding was the staggering 65% of leads being identified as referrals. If your leads are over 65%, I would recommend you go back to the 4 ways and maybe look to diversify your marketing, because it would feel like you've almost got too much business coming in from referrals, and there genuinely is more you can do to diversify that. But if you have got strong leads coming in from referrals, as it looks like you do, make sure that you've all got very strong referral systems in your agency. Change the shift and dynamic of your agency, okay, to be, you know, proactive with asking for referrals and finding ways to encourage people to refer you, and make it more of a part of your communication strategy to let people know that the majority of your work comes from referrals. Because if you tell people that, people will feel naturally inclined to refer you. Here is a typical way that referrals come from: clients, friends and family, personal acquaintances. So these are kind of the 13 ways that you will find referrals coming from. And so your network, acquaintances, previous colleagues, employees, past, present, and current and future, suppliers, your non-execs, your ambassadors that you have, your strategic partners, partner agencies, your frenemies, agency collaboration. All these people are people who refer leads in, social media contacts, prospects that you're talking to, recommendations and referral websites and reviews. Your reputation drives in referrals. Then there's almost like the accidental, the random, and just I mean, I had some the other day where I had a referral in from Austria, and no one could really tell me who the referral came from, but someone somewhere had obviously heard me speak somewhere and was happy to recommend me. So take all of those areas and make sure that they're at the heart of your referral strategy. The fifth finding was those 13 ways that generate 80% of the leads. Focus on those first. Obviously, as I said before, you want to get to all 29, but actually let's look at those 13, because if you can focus on those 13, you're probably going to find it's a lot easier to find new business than it is if you focus on the other areas, which you might take more time, more money, and may have maybe a longer sales cycle to win. So look at the top 7 areas in particular, because this is where I would start with the first 50% of the 13 is to go, the networking. Are we networking? You know, are we still building? Are we still socializing? Are we still building up the connections that we need? Are we still keeping in contact on a regular basis with previous connections? Have we got a system for doing that on a regular basis? And that isn't just a network of, you know, the managing director or the CEO or the owners. That's the networks of everybody in the business, the leadership teams in particular. Ex-clients, you know, ex-clients referred were the second referrer of on the survey. Now, you know, bearing in mind it's 186 agencies, this was quite a significant number. So, you know, have you made a list of all of your ex-clients? Have you actually sought to find out where they are now? People you used to work with, reach back out to them again. Stay in touch. Have a strategy when a client leaves that you're automatically going to follow them where they go. Is clear correlation that ex-clients will become your largest client in the future when they come back to you. The third area was strategic partnerships. So again, go through those the referral list I showed you in there. It highlights the strategic partners who are your suppliers, you know, the alliances, other agencies. You know, independent agencies don't always necessarily have large group structures. If you look at a large network agency, they will get business from intergroup, whereas independent agencies will get there was evidence of leads that came in from competitors. Leads were coming in from other complementary agencies, but they were also coming in from suppliers. Even actually, we had reference to clients' suppliers, so attending clients' events and meeting their suppliers, and those people turning into clients. Number 4, another agency really wraps into number 3. Number 5, team members. Again, with the UK survey, it was also number 5. The 5th largest way that leads came into the agency was through team members. And for me, my advice has been, since the UK report came out, was certainly make sure when you're doing your recruitment strategies that you are considering how well connected individuals are that you're recruiting. I'm not asking people to say they're guaranteeing that they're going to bring business in, but clearly team members with strong personal brands, with clear points of view, who build up good networks, can be extremely strong referrers of leads into agencies. And also, how can you empower? How can you train? How can you help the team members to drive more leads into your agency? How good is their elevator pitch when they're talking about your agency? Can you coach them? Can you give them some support so they can communicate what your agency does? Can you sit down together and look at who they know and who you could get them to attend an event or in some way interact with your business? Get a meeting with them. Number 6, existing clients. And, you know, this is probably one of the areas that and I'm going to talk about that as well, but existing clients for me, when we look back at the 4 areas, and we saw that the ex-clients and client referrals was lower in the international basis, it appears from other data I've seen that the larger agencies get, the more they forget this. And whilst I've still got some further research to do on the data, because I've always been brought up to believe that the Americans are extremely good at asking clients for referrals and introductions, the North Americans, actually, I know that in Europe and other parts of the world, we are less so inclined. We're much more passive. We don't tend to be as forthright in asking clients for introductions to other agencies. And I want to share a very quick story with you about this, which I think is very important. Last year, we ran an event, and at that event, we had a chief marketing officer on the stage, and she'd been a chief marketing officer for over 30 years. And the question was put to her, has your agency ever asked you for an introduction, for a referrer to another contact of yours? And the CMO said, no, I've not in 30 years been asked by my agencies to ever introduce them to another one of my network. And the whole audience gasped. And one of the members of that audience called me a week later, and he said that he was really taken back by that. This was a $15 million global agency, and he was running an event business, and he was in the West Coast of America, and his largest client was Intel, I believe. It was quite a large brand. And the client had said to him a week later, why is it that you never ask me for introductions to the people that I know? And he was quite shocked, because he'd just seen our talk and realized that he needed to start asking. But what was more embarrassing was his clients are now saying to him, hey, listen, I'm happy to introduce you. Why don't you ask me? She said, take a look at my LinkedIn. If there's anyone on there you want to know, let me know and I'll connect you, because you guys are brilliant at what you do. So the fact it's down for me is a concern, not for all of you, but for some of you. I think really go back and look at your current clients and come up with strategies and ways that your client service teams and your leadership teams can try and find smarter ways to try and encourage more referrals, whether that be into the organization, into other organizations, into their networks. And number 7, speaking events. As I mentioned before, if Stephen Bartlett is doing 56 speaking events a year and taking a business from a small office in Manchester up to a global agency in a matter of a few years, clearly the importance of building your thought leadership and your personal brand on a global stage through your speaking does have a massive, significant impact on your lead generation. So there's 7 slight tips for you around those top 7 areas. I hope you found those useful. I wanted to share with you some of the stories just to finish on that came from some of the contributors to the survey. So we started to work with other agencies in the Asian markets, and we looked after PR for a Taiwan market. After the contract expired, the client came to us and asked us to look after their mainline China PR because they have more confidence in us than the previous PR agency. Since then, we looked after the client's Greater China PR affairs. So again, working with other agencies, keeping in touch with existing clients, really very much underpinning that. I'm a firm believer that strong relationships, reputation is all important for new business. Recently, we had an email sent to us from overseas asking for a meeting. It looked like spam, and a couple of people in the office ignored it as they thought it was spam. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Luckily, the potential client persevered, and then I linked in with that person to check that they were legit. The client flew to Sydney and we presented them, and we're now waiting for the outcome. It could be one of the biggest clients. And the reason we got the lead was a London agency had recommended us to the client. So once again, another agency had made the recommendation. So for those of you who are reluctant to network with other agencies, you may well be missing out. Our biggest client came in from the Network One. Well, this is quite an apt one for the crew. As a project, we did good work and sealed an annual contract with a nominal fee hike. This was a project that turned into a retainer, a long-term relationship. Thank you, Network One. I think this is an advantage for independent agencies who aren't belonging to large international networks. If you can belong to groups where you can help, which will help you connect with more agencies and also have a common cause, as in solving a global challenge for clients, then that's fantastic. A long time ago, my biggest client was HSBC Bank, and without previously announcement, they cancelled our contract because RMG from WP had won their business globally. 1 week later, the current Rap Collins CEO, my direct competitor at that time, called me and said that a certain bank had decided to have a second agency, and he wanted to know if they were interested. Obviously I did, and we won. And this is the second time this week that I've heard a story like this. I had a similar situation this week where an agency I know is looking for a complementary competitive agency to share in the work. And so this is clearly another important thing. Don't rule out your direct competitors. The single biggest deal I've ever seen go from one competitor to another personally was £1 million in fees. And these guys were identical and neighbours, but one of them didn't have the capacity to deliver the work, but had the opportunity. One of the best years last year was off the back of a thought leadership event. So again, Nessa running events where one of our guests was invited, an interested party who then introduced us to her replacement. She was in the process of leaving. She then commissioned work. So a gentle reminder that the B2B sales process, whilst it serendipitously can be quite short at times, often B2B sales process can be quite long too. But again, running your own events rather than necessarily always attending other events where you've got lots of agencies and lots of brands might be a smarter way for many of us to win business. Or to find more new business leads. The lead came from an agency we acquired. Now, there were a couple of interesting people that said that the leads had come from acquisitions. And we mustn't forget that actually, when we think about new business in agencies, it comes from 3 main ways. It comes from new business, existing client business, and it also comes from acquisition. The client got in contact when they saw we'd merged with the agencies. He briefed us and said, make me look good. Make the project award winning. We have obviously a fame client there who wants to win awards, and we can make things happen. With the company, we achieved all 3 goals, and we're now one of our biggest clients. So just to finish on, some post-COVID considerations for everyone out there, because it's clear there's been some shifts. I think many global businesses have been really used to working on, video conferencing and video tools for a long time now. But the most important thing now is that more organizations are used to it. And I think that gives global agencies a real competitive edge in some ways, that they've been used to working that way for much longer. Agency people are becoming micro influencers. And I think it's important for all of you and your teams to understand that importance, that your point of view and your thought leadership is becoming more and more important in the area. And it's also becoming extremely noisy. It used to be about quality of content. I would argue today for agencies to cut through the noise, it's quality and quantity. And lastly, be aware of some of these fast growing, less saturated sectors. You know, a lot of people use the word, maybe overuse the word pivot, but certainly for me, agencies that have adapted in the last 2 months. I spoke to one agency who had lost 80% of her leads, their clients, sorry, at the beginning of COVID in the UK, and had since won 12 new clients in 8 weeks in a completely separate sector. So it just goes to show a quick adaptation could lead to some very big successes. So thank you. I hope you've enjoyed that, even though I seem to have a weird squiggly thing on the screen. And my painter outside my house decided to sand the windows during the talk. But isn't that the fun of doing live events?
Thanks so much for that. So we've actually got...
Did my painter make loads of noise sanding down the window?
Not as far as I'm aware.
I was about to throw something at the window.
That's all
I couldn't
right.
get her attention, so anyway.
That's fine. So we have a couple of questions from the audience now. This webinar, just to let everyone know, might overrun by about 5 or 10 minutes. Totally understand if people have to go, but just hit that fine with everyone. So just to kick off the questions, if you're there, Ian Bates, and you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, hi Spencer.
Hi there, Ian.
Thank you very much for your time. That was excellent, very, very useful. The 4 ways was sort of unsurprisingly surprising.
Yes, that's exactly right. It's not rocket science, but it just kind of...
You just forget it.
You just forget it, right? Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes you need somebody from outside to come in and go, oi!
Yes.
And you did it. The question was, you very briefly touched on value-based models for agencies. We're all familiar with performance-based models, etc.
Yeah.
Have you seen good examples of value-based models working? Because we have tried and clients are always suspicious.
Mm. The truth is, the only examples where I've ever seen it work well is almost when the brand and the agency come together and set up a true joint venture. So when you look at a few years back, there was the Omnicom McDonald's, where they set up a complete separate company together. Mm-hmm. And they then decided they would rev share the profits through the joint business. Mm-hmm. I know there's been many of those that have failed, but when I look at, but I think because of for me, one of the main downfalls, I've got to be careful when I say this, because I'm sure there are people who have this working. I personally I've met, well over 1,000 agencies, and I've really never seen one really work well. If I'm honest, every time I've seen it work well, what will happen is either the client will move on and the new person will want to, not pay out on it, or it becomes so lucrative or one-sided that, the contract then comes into question. So that's my personal experience. I believe in Asia, they are much more sophisticated at making it work, and it works better out there. So it may be a better question for someone who's from that particular region. Yeah. Cool. But I think it's a fair question. And, I think that to make a partnership work like that, it has to be equal. It has to be really well contracted, and it has to be, extreme, a very high level of, I would say, trust, and perhaps working together for a long period of time to make it really, really work.
Cool. No, that's cool. Thanks very much.
No worries.
Yes.
Your Agencynomics for your bookshelf.
Yeah.
Thanks. We also have a question from Claire Curry in the audience.
Hi, Claire.
Are you there?
I've just unmuted myself. Just wanted to echo those comments. Thank you so much, Spencer. That was
thank you, Claire.
and obvious, but it's usually the obvious that is staring you in the face and you can't always see it. So thank you so much.
Wow.
I think it's probably the best webinar I've attended in a long time.
Oh.
And also Stephanie as well for the intro, because I thought you did that brilliantly. And Spencer, I just wanted to ask you, in the absence of Nest at the moment, what would you recommend we should be doing in the absence of that? I guess now we're obviously limited with the physical locations, and I'd just be keen to kind of get your understanding or your thoughts. I mean, you mentioned LinkedIn a lot. Does that almost kind of...
No, I don't think there is this absence. I had this conversation last night on a webinar. I know, you know, to do the networking events, that side of things really well, you know, you just have to kind of prioritize some time to just have 2 conversations with someone that you know and you've never met before every day. And you can do that on Zoom. In fact, people are more accessible now to speak to. People have got more time. There's less commuting going on. I've had many people say to me they've managed to speak to marketing directors they would never, ever have got through to before. I think when people connect you on LinkedIn, I think it's a great opportunity. Why don't we pick up a Zoom call? So I think we can swap out, you know, the face-to-face with virtual. As long as people are meeting face-to-face, I think it carries much more weight. The speaking events, I mean, I've got what, 1 webinar, 2 talks this week. That's probably 300 people on this one. I mean, I'm guessing by the time I finish this week, it'll be 500 people have heard me speak, poor people. And so I think you still can do speaking events. You can still go on to, there are so many podcasts out there now. So many that, you know, and if you're not so good at speaking, then maybe join a panel, you know, maybe try and create some smaller networking groups. So I think it doesn't have to be an absence necessarily. I think the Nest area does include thought leadership online and LinkedIn, and you talked about that. I think I know Gary Vaynerchuk is a love or hate character for most of us, but he is an agency owner. Let's not forget that. And actually, if you look at someone like Daniel from Brain Labs, Brain Labs is again a global business that's, you know, organically grew very quickly. It was the fastest growing. It was the Deloitte Tech Fast 50th growing company in Europe a couple of years ago. Again, very strong LinkedIn presence, you know, very strong thought leadership. And Daniel isn't a mass extrovert, you know. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. You know, he's not at all a Vaynerchuk. He's just a genuinely nice guy who talks a lot about data and marketing and does that very well. So I think if you can find your own way to build your personal brand and to build your point of view and use LinkedIn as a business channel, and, you know, then I think it's a really, really strong way. Don't be afraid to reach out and connect to your LinkedIn connections as well. You know that when you do a post on LinkedIn, only 5% of people see your post. Only 5%. Wow. So actually what you don't realize is that if you write a post and you don't get more than half a dozen likes in a very short period of time, you won't even go into the main feed. The algorithm will only show you to your closest contacts. So it's very important that you get posts that get quick traction, and don't be afraid to personal message. You know, spend a bit of time, instead of the old days, picking up the phone, dialing people. Why don't just start with the A's and say, you know, hi, Anna, haven't seen you in years. How are you? How are you doing? We should catch up sometime. Yeah. And I think some of those exercises, I'd certainly start by writing a list down of all the people that have ever referred you a piece of business in the past, and reach out to those guys first and just say thank you as an example. So there are lots of things to do, but it's probably about organizing how you do those things. But yeah.
I think you need to do a webinar then next, please, on LinkedIn strategies.
Gina, I'm gonna plug a guy called James Potter. Like, write his name down, find him. A day's training with him will change your life. He's brilliant. So, but I mean, you know, and I have no affiliation with him. He's just, every time I introduce him to someone, they tell me how brilliant he is. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. That's really helpful, Spencer. Really appreciate it.
James Potter is amazing. It came up on the chat.
Brilliant.
This guy's a legend.
Yeah, I'll be stalking him this afternoon. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Claire. We have another question from the audience. They've said, LinkedIn used to be a very successful prospecting tool. However, it seems to have become just another white noise platform that clients don't want to be bothered with. Other than the obvious of providing value first, give prior to receiving, what are your thoughts on using LinkedIn to connect with ideal prospective clients?
Okay, I think that's really, really fair point. First of all, reason I made that comment, it's about quantity now, not quality. So it's quality and quantity. Is there is a lot of noise, and so therefore, unfortunately, you do need to take a slightly larger approach to LinkedIn now to cut through the noise, to raise your presence. But there's nothing to stop you reaching out to people on LinkedIn and asking them, you know, how can you help them? You know, do they have, what problems do they have that they need solving? And I don't mean problems that you're going to sell to them with, but I did a LinkedIn post. Those of you connected to me will know that I sent everyone a LinkedIn post very recently in the last few weeks saying, let me know if there's anything. Did you get it, Stephanie? You did. There you go. Just to prove the point. So, and I said, you know, hi, I hope things are okay considering COVID. You know, how can I help you? So I think there are ways that you can ask people how you can help them, help solve their problems. Those problems may well turn out to be things that you can solve through your business or things you can just help solve personally. I think that the importance of LinkedIn now, though, is to communicate your point of view and to build your community up. I don't think it's necessarily about people gathering anymore. I know there are two strategies. You can go, I'm going to connect to everybody, but actually some of the most successful people I've seen recently have actually removed all the people they don't know, and they focus more on the people that they do know. And I think to answer that to further go on, if you connect to lots of strangers and you write a post on LinkedIn and only 5% of people see your post, that means a lot of strangers are going to see it, which means you won't get much engagement. So it's worth you thinking about, less is more, so quality, but then how do you increase the quantity of communications to those people? Hopefully that answers the question. Don't give up on LinkedIn. There's still lots more value there. It's getting bigger and it's getting used more frequently by people.
Thanks. We actually have one more quick question about LinkedIn. They've said, is your personal or your company profile more important on LinkedIn, would you say?
Is your the personal 100%. Forget your company profile. We're in a world now where, people are behind every large organization. Who runs Tesla? It's Elon Musk, right? People, Jeff Bezos, we know who he, and if you haven't got a person behind it, then behind the brand, then yeah, sure, you need to be Nike and get some famous people behind it. But first and foremost, it's the person. I think, people, when I get an email from my bank now, I don't get it from some stranger. I get it from the chief exec. He communicates to me. It's not just, the name of the bank. So I think the personal side of it in an agency is extremely important. The company pages on LinkedIn are not, the algorithm doesn't show the content on there. It's something like I think it's 15% of the overall amount of reach. So it's much, much more limited. So always post from yourself, never post from the company post. And then I would recommend you then separately share that post that you did on the company post at a separate point. So without question, it's about your personal side of it. But of course, don't be afraid to not include the company in the post, etc., etc. So yeah, more about you and your leadership team and the individuals in your company. That's much more important. When we sell service on two things, right? Remember this, everybody. It's trust and chemistry. Yep. Do I like you? Do I trust you? And then it's capability or creds, right? Do you have the credentials and capability to deliver the service? That do I trust you doesn't come from the company page. It comes from the you page. Do I like this person? Could I work with that person? Could I work with the rest of their team? Rarely will a brand ever give a piece of business to an agency because they've got the capabilities to do the job, but they don't like the team they're going to be working with, right? So always remember that.
So we have time for a couple more questions. So Laura Quinn, are you there with your question?
Yeah, I am. Hi, Spencer.
Hi there.
Yeah, it was really useful and your book's amazing.
Where's the sun gone?
Yeah, I know. It's looking pretty grey. I am in Swindon though, so I could blame that. Yeah. Actually, like what you just said is quite interesting, and it kind of leads into my question. And I'm not sure if this is really granular, so I apologise if it is. But I was just thinking about content, and you know, there's a lot of phrases around like content is king and things like that, and that does count for lead generation as well, I think. But do you have any kind of thoughts, or have you thought about anything in your conversations that relate to what kind of content might really help to boost lead generation? Because you could do like kind of puff pieces on yourself as a company, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily work. I know it varies industry by industry, but do you think you should be sort of self-focused, or?
I'm gonna, if I made a recommendation to everybody listening here, go and buy a book by someone called Daniel Priestley, and it's called Key Person of Influence, and it's an international best-selling book, business book. Key Person of Influence, and in that book he talks about, you know, the importance of everybody becoming a key person of an expert in a niche area. Now, you have to be an expert in a niche area. The world is too big now for generalists, right? So where is your expertise and what do you know about? I always remember the famous ad guy, Paul Arden, who said, give away everything you know and more will come back to you. I mean, I think he wrote that book 20 years ago, right? So, you know, so, you know, talk about what you do. Listen, I do consultancy for helping agencies grow, but I'm telling you everything I've learned today and I'm giving it away, you know. And maybe I know a few more tricks up my sleeve, but, you know, ultimately, you know, it's about you sharing your knowledge and people understanding that you understand what you're doing and that you're, and that, you know, actually, and maybe from the 200 or 300 people that see what you give away, only 1 or 2 will come back and say, you know what, you talk a lot of sense and I know what you're saying is right, but I haven't got the time to fix it. Could you fix it for me? And so that's what I would say. So read Key Person of Influence. And I think, you know, that will help you understand how to focus and where to focus, I think. And then talk about that. Yeah, that, and be the most famous person. It takes 12 months, only 12 months from now. This time next year, you could easily be a key person of influence. And I don't necessarily mean you have to be some kind of raving, extroverted, you know, sort of person on video all the time talking. You don't have to be that person. But let me tell you now, 3 years ago, I didn't have any, I wasn't doing anything. I was liking people's LinkedIn posts and I was sharing them, which is probably sharing is probably the worst thing you can do on a LinkedIn post, by the way, because it gets no traction. And that's all I did. No one knew what I did. And actually, weirdly, and I you know, love him or hate him, Gary Vaynerchuk did say one clever thing, which was talk about the process. Talk about what you do every day. You know, don't name the client, but just say, today I helped a client do this. Isn't it interesting how when you take this approach, you know, the results that happen and talk about what you do and how you do it. And actually, if you do that well, then actually people will then see you as a trusted expert. Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, this is my personal view, but I think it's good to get involved in conversations as well. So do that.
Absolutely, yes.
Make sure that you're constantly almost like trawling it by the hour to look for stuff to speak to people about, because that's how people get noticed, isn't it?
So it's just the art of conversation, isn't it, really? And I totally agree. Like, whatever you do, make sure that you don't just like a post. Like, I'm guilty sometimes of doing that. So we're all human, but do go in and write something, write an opinion, but don't, if you've got nothing nice to say, don't write it. And if it's constructive, be sensitive, because people misread, you know, constructive things. And so I'm not asking, I'm not a yes man. I say what I think, but I will probably, you know, if you have anything nice to say, don't say it. So just be very
positive. The world of social media today, huh?
So be positive, and also, by the way, I think a good friend of mine who runs an agency, he told me recently that he believed emotion in posts carried weight with the algorithm. So if you write emotional things, I think that really helps. Okay, so use lots of amazing, wonderfuls. My adjectives are really poor here, but you know, in your languages, just try and use more descriptive words, better adjectives, and yeah, that should work. But yeah, engage in conversations for sure. That's definitely a strategy.
Thanks so much, Spencer. That was really helpful.
No worries, my pleasure.
Thanks so much, everyone who asked a question. We've actually got to wrap up now, unfortunately. But I'm going to share on my screen Spencer's details, so that if you didn't have time to ask your question, you can just send him an email. So his email address is spg@cact.us. So I just want to say a really big thank you to Spencer for that great webinar. And thank you all for coming as well. We really hope you enjoyed it. So we're going to be holding webinars at the same time every Wednesday. Hopefully you've signed up, so if you're ready, the next one will be held on the 10th of June at 1 o'clock London time. So our next speaker, Marsha Lindsay, will be discussing integrative thinking, or how to become a genius. The origins of this approach go back to the groundbreaking 2013 book, Playing to Win, co-authored by P&G's iconic CEO, A.G. Lafley, and the prize-winning Dean of the Rotman Business School, Roger Martin. It takes a real-world look at how some of the world's leading business strategies manage to craft win-win situations, from issues that seem irreconcilable and stakeholders who seem implacably opposed. So Marsha is a researcher, thought leader, author, popular speaker, and founder of business consultancy, Lindsay Foresight and Stratagem. Her life's work has been researching and identifying emerging marketplace dynamics, forecasting for top executives, what's next and best for competitive advantage, accelerated growth, and more effective marketing. So in this webinar session, full of practical examples, you'll learn the origins of integrative thinking, why and how it works, why it's now a critical competency for everyone on your team. So if you'd like to find out and sign up to more Webinar Wednesdays, you can find them on our website. So that is www.thenetwork1.com/webinars. Additionally, we will be holding the Indie Forum Digital, and it's now open for booking. So between the 22nd and the 26th of June, which is the time that we would have been in the south of France, but unfortunately won't be, we're going to host an online discussion every day on a range of relevant topics for the industry right now. So to find out more and to register, just go to www.thenetwork1.com/the-indie-forum-digital, or just go to our events little thing on the toolbar and you can find it there. And finally, before we wrap up, and thank you for staying if you have, if you've not yet filled in our independent agency survey, the link is on the screen now, and we're going to email a link in our follow-up email. We'd be very grateful if you could participate, and we believe the data gain will be useful and practical for all independent agencies. So I will let you go now. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us. Thanks again to Spencer, and have a great day.